Impro Theater and the cast and crew of this online performance would like to take this time to honor the indigenous peoples of the ancestral and unceded homelands we each inhabit, and to consider the legacy of colonization. In Los Angeles, we pay our respect to the Gabrielina Tongva peoples. Impro Theater supports the promotion of an anti-racist world, where we recognize diversity, equity, and inclusion as central to our values. We are listening, learning, and growing. We invite you to join us in taking action wherever we can to create a more just world. Well, thanks for joining us, everybody. Very excited for having you here to watch the show and or listen. And if you're watching this in October of 2022, I hope you're having an excellent pre-Halloween startup. And if you're watching this or listening to this sometime in the future, how is the future going? Have we gotten things solved? Today, my guest is my very dear friend, one of my dearest friends in the entire world. Mark is a singer-songwriter. He is an all-around musician. He is a film editor, improviser, an actor, a dad, a dog father, and someday governor of New York. I don't know. I don't make the plans. Please welcome Mark Hervey, ladies and gentlemen. Ta-da!
Please not governor. I don't want. I don't want to hold office. Thank you.
Fame takes us in directions that we can't predict. I mean, if you're called,
True.
you might have to. Mark, I'm so excited to have you here.
Nice to be here. Nice to see your face.
Have just released an album, your first solo album in your life.
Yeah.
It's called About Time.
Yeah, so that of course it's a little wink in the eye, but it is about time. It's about the revolutions of the Earth around the sun, because it took me 60 years to do. 60 years on this planet to figure out that I could actually do that and give myself permission to do it.
I mean, in fairness, for the first few years, you probably didn't have the equipment, and stuff. Like it's
but dude, like seriously, like I played in bands since I was, my first band in, like as a middle schooler, I was the lead singer of, and we sang "Taking Care of Business" by Bachman Turner Overdrive.
Yes.
And I was the lead singer, and we were called Royal Flush, and that was the only song we knew.
Did you play guitar?
At that point I didn't play guitar. I was learning banjo at the time, if you can believe.
Nice.
Which I never kept up with, but it taught me how to play a stringed instrument, which sort of brought me into guitar playing.
So what you're saying is your first band, you played only Canadian rock and roll.
Exactly. Exactly. That was it. We were, and it turned into my obsession with Bruce Cockburn eventually, of course, for those who know.
Was that still in Washington, D.C.? That
was in Madison, Wisconsin, where we eventually met.
Yeah. Later. So you're born in Washington, D.C., I believe, and then your parents make the journey to Wisconsin. Was it your dad's work that brought you to Madison?
Yeah. Well, first we were outside of Boston for about 4 years, so I was 9 when we moved to Madison.
You don't have a Boston accent at all.
Yeah, and I don't have a Wisconsin accent either.
No, you don't.
I don't know.
You trained that out of you. What kind of music was in your house growing up?
Oh, it was. I grew up in a very conservative. Oh, my son Leo is home. I'm doing an interview with Mike Rock. It's actually a real interview, so don't interrupt it, okay?
Come and say hi, though.
Come say hi. Mike Rock.
What is up? Great to
Leo.
see you.
I can't hear you.
I know because I
Oh,
have my
he's using his
headphones in.
Bluetooth.
Yeah, so the music in the house was a lot of church music. Like my dad, my dad uh, Sunday nights at church on Sunday nights would lead the congregation in singing. So there was a lot of Amazing Grace and Great is Thy Faithfulness, and I was brought up on hymns. My my parents loved show tunes and Broadway and that kind of stuff. Not to the point that your parents, but they were into, like there was always like albums of Oklahoma and
South Pacific.
A&I, South Pacific, all that
Sure.
kind of stuff was in the house. But I have three older sisters, so from a very young age, I mean, they're 7, 8, and 11 years older than I am. I'm 60, so you do the math. they, they had Dave Clark 5 and the Monkees and the Beatles and that stuff on one of those fold and play, and a bunch of singles too.
Sure.
So, and there was the radio as well in my sister's room. So, like, I love the Monkees. In fact, I still have the vinyl. I've inherited their vinyl. Last Train to Clarksville, and all of that stuff. I love the Monkees and Mickey especially.
Daydream Believer.
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite hymns? Any favorite liturgical music that you grew up with?
Wow, that's a tough one. My father's, I'll say my father's favorite hymn was "Great Is Thy Faithfulness," which he like we knew back to front, up and down, because anytime he led music for church, it's always open your hymns to number 42, Great Is Thy Faithfulness, and off we went. As far as the tunes, like something like the Old Rugged Cross is just like beautiful. Amazing Grace, of course. But
Yeah.
I'm having to dig in my memory to
Yeah, of course. I was just thinking about things like How Great Thou Art and
oh yeah. George Beverly Shea sings "How Great Thou Art." Yeah, we had that album.
Yeah. To God be the glory and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So when your sisters had like the Dave Clark 5 and the Beatles and the Monkees and et cetera, was it okay? Like, was it okay for them to be rocking out in their bedroom kind of thing?
Kinda. My parents were never, they thought they thought the Beatles were long-haired hippies and freaks, with their like on Ed Sullivan, they had those long hair. I mean, it wasn't until years later, I remember in maybe the late 70s when I was in high school, them going to like a Pops concert on the lawn of the Capitol in Madison and seeing the orchestra play tunes from the Beatles.
Sure.
And they were like, "Oh, I guess that's all right." Paul McCartney is the one that wrote Yesterday. That's a nice tune, but of course, I mean, rock and roll these days is just all of it. Rock and roll music, popular music is part of the mainstream. So, but back then there was a cultural shift going on, and so it was shocking for my parents, who came out of the greatest generation, to have and then lived through the 50s and started a family in the 50s. And I was born in 62, to all of a sudden have this huge cultural shift where, you know, um, the the Vietnam War, the Kennedy being shot, Martin Luther King being shot. We lived in outside of D.C. when Martin Luther King got shot. My parents were flying. We were in the process of moving to Boston, and I remember my parents describing flying into D.C. and seeing fires burning from riots from Boston at that time. So I mean, I, I I don't think people quite grasp the cultural divide between parents and children that I experienced, because seriously, my kid Leo and I 2 weeks ago went to see Pavement together. Like we share a lot of the same tastes in music.
This is what the 90s was like.
Yeah, and he like turns me on to new stuff all the time. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Like, um, so so it's such a different world right now, and how we've been brought up, or how I brought my kids up in a relatable, communicatable fashion. And music was a part of that, and music was a way to rebel. Music was a way at that point to separate yourself from the previous generation. And so, I mean, that's what was happening, really.
Yeah, it's so weird to think of, you know, our parents having kids in the late 50s, early 60s, and them thinking of an oldie as like the Paul Whiteman Orchestra or Glenn Miller from the 30s and 40s. And right now, if you listen to a song right now that is 20 years old, you're listening to Hey Ya from Outkast, you're listening to Hollaback Girl, you're listening to Britney Spears, Beyonce, Snoop
Yeah.
Dogg, Drop It Like It's Hot, Missy Elliott. So like the difference between what the quote unquote, what the greatest generation people were having to listen to as new music compared to what they were used to is such a gigantic.
Yeah, it was a chasm. It was
Yeah.
a freaking huge chasm that happened. I blame LSD.
I think we all do. So I'm going to try to remember. There's one band name that I can't for the life of me remember, and I'm embarrassed, but I think it was Az.
Yes.
I was right. So is that after the Bachman Turner Overdrive?
Oh yeah. That was much later after the Bachman Turner Overdrive stuff. I started playing I started playing acoustic guitar seriously in high school. And I didn't really know. I mean, my oldest sister at that point had turned me on to the Eagles, which were sort of easy to figure out. Like I figured out how to play Desperado. um, and Eventually, because of my conservative upbringing, I joined a group, and we were called Az, and it was with a bunch of friends from church. And I mean, we were what back then, I guess people would call contemporary Christian music or a Christian rock band.
Sure.
But we didn't necessarily want to define ourselves as that. We were just playing music. And so that was really the first time that I was like getting up in front of an audience with songs that I had written or other band members had written. And we did a lead singer, Randy Hall, who played bass, and I played guitar and keyboards in that band. Yeah.
Was Randy in the band because he shares a first name with Randy Bachman of BTO? Is that how that happened?
It was.
That is that's a weird requirement.
Amazing. Was it totally? And he wanted to be Canadian, although he lives in Atlanta now.
So then,
but he's a super amazing multi-instrumentalist as well. But then that band busted up. Eventually I met Dave Morlock, who is now Biff Moyer, and he became the lead singer of a band that uh, would become Emerald Choir and then the Gomers, which is still a Madison institution to this day.
it is.
And still play shows. So I was one of the founding members of the Gomers in Madison. We had and so this was the early '80s, and Butch, our friend Butch Big, who is the drummer for Garbage and producer of every awesome record in the '90s. He and his buddy Steve Marker started a studio, Smart Studio, this little a warehouse. Well, it started in Steve's basement initially, but then they got a warehouse space, glued egg cartons to the wall, which I think your brother helped with.
I did too.
And you did too.
Yeah.
We didn't know each other.
No, I remember.
We had not met.
I remember with Doug, who now everybody knows as Duke, but I remember using like a glue gun thing to put the egg cartons on the walls.
Yeah. So so we had written a bunch of songs and wanted to record an album, and so Emerald Choir, that is, we booked studio time. I think it was $15 an hour. We would book like 4-hour slots. We would save all our money, collect cans, turn them in for cash, and
yeah,
and buy studio time. And of course, like Butch, like we would go over every single time. Like we'd book 4 hours and we'd be in there for 8, and Butch would just be like, "Just buy me a 6-pack next time you come in."
Yeah.
And with a 6-pack of Corona, and you'd be like, "Nectar of the gods." That was the way it was, you know.
So great.
And so that's how the essentially they were. Butch called us up one day and was like, "Do you guys have any other songs you want to record? Because I want to break in this new engineer, Margie." And so we said, "No, not really, but we have all these goofy songs, kind of punk songs that we've been writing in rehearsal when things get kind of loose and we switch instruments. Maybe we could do that." So that was the birth of the Gomers. We actually went in and recorded 4 songs with Margie, and boom, and that's the band that still exists.
Yeah, and the great thing about the Gomers is that you once we had all moved to New York, Mark and I had moved to New York away from Madison, you could still go back to Madison and play in the Gomers.
Yeah. Once a Gomer, always a Gomer.
Yeah. Yeah. No Gomer left behind, I think was the policy.
No Gomer left behind. True.
And so, Biff goes on to be a guitar tech for Robert Fripp and Adrian Belew and King Crimson, and et cetera. And of course, obviously the Tom Hansen has a career as a solo artist as well as
amazing.
And Gomer's the Gomer influence in the musical world continues. So the Emerald Choir. So just to backtrack for 1 second to was As called As, or was it called AZ?
As.
Yeah, because my brain, I don't remember. Anyway, so As did, like, you did some church shows.
Yeah, I mean that's where we came out of. So yeah, we would play in the basement of churches, but we also played like fraternities. I mean, we did a tour of some southern states, and we ended up doing some fraternities, some Christian coffee houses. Like it was a mess.
And some guy didn't pay you.
Yeah, no, the guy at the Christian coffee house. It was like we after playing like for 2.5 hours, he was like, here's $5. And we're like, like, this doesn't even pay for gas, even back then, to get us to the next gig. He was, yeah, his the famous phrase was, uh, "The anointing breaks the yoke."
So
Whatever that.
is that a real biblical quote, or is that just a
No, I think it's just some baloney of like, if you're anointed by God, that they're referring to the yolk, not an egg,
yeah,
but the
yeah, the
yolk of
yoke.
the
Sure.
oxen, right? Like, so that your burden will be laid down if you're anointed by God. So obviously we were not.
So he was saying, I'm not going to pay you,
Right.
and my justification is that my Lord has not proved to me that you are anointed and therefore deserve money. So
Yes.
therefore, good luck, fellas. And then
Yeah.
that quote, I'm guessing it was Gordon, but was
I
it
think it
Gordon?
was Tim.
Oh, Tim Lang, who who turned. Go ahead. I'll let you
Who
say
turned it into the ointment breaks.
it. I don't know if
We
that's funny
were
for
from
anybody else.
that day. Yeah, I don't know. From that day on, it was like, does anybody need the Lord's ointment?
So
Like,
just lest people think that you know evangelical self-righteous people didn't exist before present day. They did.
yes, they have been there, and I bear witness to that.
So here's a serious musical question. So you've written uh, a shit ton of songs since whatever high school or something. When you put together this album, though, you were like, clean slate. I'm going to start from scratch. Uh, because I know a lot of your songs from back in the day, and none of those are on this record. Was it? Did you wake up one day and say, "I'm going to write a whole new batch of songs," or did you say, "I'm going to put together an album and maybe who knows what the source material will be"?
Um, the, it's a little tricky because, I don't know if you know, but this thing called the pandemic happened, where some shit really hit the fan. Um, and I lost my work dried up as a video editor, um, for about 5 months. So, uh, and I had COVID right at the beginning. It was not fun, and I also had it this summer, and that wasn't fun
Oh my god!
either.
I don't know if
Woo!
I knew that.
But
Sorry.
yeah, yeah. But I live to tell the tale, thank God. Um, so to give myself reason to get up and um, live and take care of my family, and or take care of myself, I started giving myself musical projects and video projects. I cut a few videos where, like, I recorded John Lennon's "Nobody Told Me There'd Be Days Like These" together with a montage of all sorts of COVID stuff going on. And then I started challenging myself to try to record some of my favorite artists and reproduce the sounds that they made. And all I have is an iMac in my bedroom. That's it. Like, I mean, I have an acoustic guitar, a cajon. Like, I don't have a drum set, whatever. I have a bass guitar, an electric guitar, uh, whatever. And so I was basically teaching myself how to produce, even though I didn't know it. I was literally just trying to give myself something to survive, because creatively, and mentally, I needed to. Um, and the stress of that, uh, I know you've heard stories from people who have been in New York, but it was really unbelievable. We're in kind of a crossroads where we live, so there were literally sirens, ambulance sirens every 10 to 15 minutes all day, 24 hours a day for 6 weeks, let's say. It took me a year to not hear a siren and it just be like, and when you don't know what's going on or what it is that you're having to hide from, you're washing all your groceries, it was super stressful. Um, all this to say, the first foray out of the house, really, that summer was with some close friend of ours, some close friends of ours, and um, they had booked some time at this place up near Lake Ontario and asked us to come. And I didn't even know if I wanted to go because it was like, is it okay? Can we travel?
Yeah.
It was just weird. And we end up the first day there. I'm sitting out on this porch looking out at Lake Ontario, this beautiful scenery. And I brought this kind of 3/4 nylon string guitar with me. And I I just started writing this song, which is on the album, uh, called By My Side, for my wife, because um, it seemed like the world was crumbling around us. Um, and she has always been my strength through all of this, the love that we share. And so, like, with tears coming out my face, like the song came out in like 10 minutes. And then my friend Fabian came in and was like, Marky, are you okay? And I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And I tried to play the song for him and I couldn't. I was like, just give me all, I can play it for you tomorrow. But right now it's really raw. But that was sort of the start, the seed. Like I had known enough to give myself something to do. I was recording. I was at an emotional crisis. I was broken, and it was this release, and that song came out. Um, and I continued recording once I got, even when I started working again, I continued recording and I started doing some cover songs. I did some stuff that I hope to release as well. I did um, a Talking Head song. I did a Three Dog Night song. I did some Eagles tunes with Steve Burke, where we I hope to release it called Steve and Mark Break the Eagles. We do kind of a different take on some of the Eagles stuff. His guitar playing is amazing. Anyway, Steve was one of the Gomers, and he was stuck in Shanghai,
Yeah.
and we were passing tracks back and forth. Um, and then after January 6th happened, I know I'm sort of fast forwarding through this journey, but when the attempted insurrection happened at the Capitol, I remember people talking about how fragile our democracy was, and I was like, oh, I haven't heard that song for years, the song by Sting, and so I just I looked up the chords. I didn't even go and listen to it again. I looked up the chords and started playing it. I was like, wow, this is right in my range. This is nice. And it's literally 3 chords, but the rhythm is kind of tricky. And I was like, I think I could do a nice version of this. So I recorded it. It came out really nice. And then I was like, who could I get to play the solo? And then I was like, my Gomer friend Biff. I want
Of
him to do a
course.
violin solo. So I sent him the tracks. And again, with no plan to release anything, this is all just, I need to do this because it feels good. it's good for my soul. So I sent him the tracks, and he sent me two. He he initially sent me two versions of violin that were beautiful, and then like a half hour later, he was like, "Wait, I've done another one. I sent you a third one, and that third one, like it just made me like I was like, oh, oh my god, this is beautiful." And so that's the one that's actually on the record, the uh, the solo that he plays. I use the other ones as well, sort of mixed to the side to embellish what he's doing. But that like he just nailed it, and it's gorgeous, just gorgeous. And then I was like, this deserves a real drummer. At that point, I'd been programming the drums and building the drum parts on my own. So I just called my friend David Berger, who I had recently gotten in contact with through Magena, um, working on a project for her, Mike's better half. And 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 he recorded the drum tracks in his kitchen in Queens and sent them back to me. And I was like, okay, this, this. Like once I had recorded that, I knew I knew I could make a record.
That is amazing. On Fragile is I'm glad you chose the Sting song as opposed to the entire album by Yes. But
which Biff, when I sent it to him, I was like, "Can you record Fragile for me?" And he thought it
was. Is it the same time signature
as
as as as
no,
Sting's?
no,
Oh, because
Sting's is no, it's a.
Da, 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 da.
I mean, it's an 8, but it has this sort of Latin
Yeah,
rhythm.
yeah. I was going to ask you if your version is a bossa nova beat.
I don't know what it is. Like I played the guitar on it, and that was how I played it. And then Berger picked it up on the drums, and then was just and did it like it's a killer. Like
Yeah.
like what he sent back was just amazing. Like
maybe I'm trying to sound more musically smart than I am. But
I honestly, dude, I don't know what to call it either. Like it just happened.
Yeah.
And
Biff's violin playing reminds me so much of Hugh Marsh, who played violin with a million people but Bruce Cockburn for years.
Yeah.
It just sounded so. I mean, I was like, God, it's beautiful. Really just.
Yeah, like if anybody has ever checked out the track Loner by Bruce Cockburn off of Inner City Front, you'll hear some amazing violin playing as well.
Yeah. Yeah, just amazing. Going back to By My Side, when you were playing by Lake Ontario and just sitting on the porch with the little vinyl string guitar, were you making notations in a notebook? Were you saying like, I got to remember these words, I got to remember?
I had my phone.
Oh, that's right. Sorry, I forget.
These days, that I mean, seriously, I have so many. I said, so many lyrical ideas in notes, and lyrical ideas as like it's like a notebook.
Yeah.
It's full of stuff, and I'll come back to that later in another song. But so yeah, so I was saying, okay, the song is in D in 3/4 time, but I'm starting the melody on an A, and the song is a bit hymn-like. It's really simple.
I should show you what I wrote, because I wrote solemn hymnal love song.
Right.
And I wrote Shades of Peter Gabriel produced by Daniel Lanois on my notes also.
Oh, that's funny because my friend Fabian, who was there, he he's from Argentina. Our kids are best friends. In fact, they're roommates in college. But Fabian played bass for Fito Paez in the 80s and is on a number of his albums. For those who don't know, Fito Paez is one of the biggest rock stars in Argentina. And he just played Radio City, and Elvis Costello like came on stage and sang with him. Like he's huge, and Fabian was one of the people I list as a production consultant. Like I would constantly play songs for him because he's a multi-instrumentalist and has such a great ear for music. But when I first played the album for him, he was like, dude, it has kind of a Daniel Lanois feel. And so you're not like, I guess you're not wrong in that.
Yeah, I wrote that down on a couple of songs just because I wanted to remember sonically what I was digging. I have questions about songs. Do you want to?
Well, let me just circle back around.
Please.
So finally, so Fragile was the first time I realized like I had the skills to record, but I still psychologically needed to get over some of my own shit to make it happen. As much as I love my father and as much as his encouragement and his love growing up, he discouraged me from playing music to the point where he forbid me to major in music in college, which is all I ever wanted to do, you know. So my father became part of the larger universe in 2016. And since then, I've been coming into my own as a musician, like to call myself a musician. I don't think I ever did it so much. Like I might have said it, but I didn't believe it until like a year and a half ago. Really, I didn't believe it. Like I felt like I was just pretending. I felt like I wasn't. It was just something I did on the side, and it is something I do on the side. But it's part of my being. Like now I see it. It's like a part. Like it's something that it's it's just oozed out the sides all this time, whether I like it or not. So. So coming to realize that in January of this year, I said that was it. I was like, by my 60th birthday, I'm going to write, record, be done with this album. I did go back and look for a few songs. That was one of the first things I did. I have tapes and tapes and tapes. One of those songs is A Million Ways. Another one is Rainbow. Both of them have gone through changes, some serious changes from when I wrote them. And then Dennis Quaid, which I was part of a band called Tuppy the Band, where it was sort of like the New York version of the Gomers. It was a lot of fun. I guess the closest thing I would compare us to is like Fountains of Wayne kind of stuff. Puppy. So
I just want to make a quick notation for the viewers at home that Tuppy the band is named Tuppy after a Tupperware like milkshake container that eventually found its way to be used for other purposes. but the band took its name from a Tupperware container. It's
a Tupperware container that was used to imbibe cannabis.
Yeah,
and we had to differentiate between the band and the bong. So, you can't get confused now. But again, that band started out as a joke and then ended up playing for years together. So yeah, so that was in January. I decided let's do this. January of this year, and then I found myself with a 5-week hole in my schedule between jobs. And instead of being freaked out by it like I had been in the past, because of the pandemic, I was like, I can take 5 weeks off and I can write music. And that's what I did. Like, once I allowed myself and gave myself the permission to write music, it started like it was like turning on a faucet, and I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. I was like catching songs out of the ether. It felt like it, and but it wasn't emotionally. It was really raw and difficult at the same time. But knowing that I could allow myself that space was really key. So a lot of the album was written in that 5 week period in April and early May. So
because the dam had been broken.
Yeah, I had given myself the goal and given myself the permission uh, to do it. And up until the release date, it still is really, it's one of the most vulnerable and it's the most vulnerable I've ever felt in putting a piece of performance or art out into the world, because it's so autobiographical. The album is really, all the songs are are pieces of me.
Clearly, themes of love, loss, the passage of time, loss of innocence, as fragile, obviously, fragility and vulnerability, betrayal, innocence. There's just so much packed in that it does feel like a memoir. It does feel like an autobiography, and
right.
The Zen aspect of Make It Last, the opening track.
Title song, yeah.
It's all about right now.
It's not really the title song because it's not the title of the album, but it is really the thesis statement of the album.
Yeah. Be here now. Very, very Ram Dass and Buddhist in that way. I just love at the end of Make It Last. It was sort of like the indication that time keeps going, is this almost military like snare drum happens as then the violin picks up, and I know that your heritage is Scottish, but it reminded me of just an Irish, the way some Irish tunes that would be played at a ceilidh or whatever. At the end of the song, you feel that the song keeps going, even though music, you know what I mean? The music keeps going because
yeah, exactly. I'm so glad that you got that, because that's exactly. I didn't want the song to fade out. I wanted the song to continue in people's heads. Like, I wanted the feeling to linger. What's amazing about that song also is that I don't know if you recognize that guitar riff has been around since the early 90s. That
I would if I listened to it again, I'm sure.
And it has prompted all sorts of melodies, and I've always wanted to make it into a song. and the guitar riff is circular. It just does the same thing over and over again, but it doesn't really resolve itself. It feels like it just continues, which is the what I tried to capture in the lyric of the song. Staying in the present, that the struggle to stay in the present, the thing that grounds me in the present is the love and affection that I share with those that I have connection with. And then the plea for us to continue living there. I sent the track to Biff again to say, dude, you want to put violin on this? And he was like, yeah, sure. And he sent it back to me, and he whistled. That's him whistling.
That's amazing. Just
and I was like, oh my God, it's so beautiful.
in the tradition of the whistling in golden years, or Two of Us and the Beatles, or Andrew Bird in present day, just this beautiful whistle.
Yeah, just beautiful. And then he did give me violin at the end. And the song, when I sent it to him, did have a sort of cutoff point. But what had happened when I was producing it, I was like, where he started playing violin, I didn't want the violin to come in yet. So I just took all those tracks and slid them down. And then when all the rest of the tracks faded out, his violin was still there. And I was like, oh my God, perfect. Like it was one of those happy accidents.
Yeah.
that I was like, I couldn't have planned that any better. And I stumbled
literally
on they're happy accidents happen all the time.
Because on the edit window, you had just literally just moved it to get it out of the way of the what do you call it? The main window of
where
you just
exactly
kind of pushed it this way.
And the thing is I can do that because the song again is the same chords over and over. It's circular, so that violin is going to track wherever I land, pretty much wherever I landed, as long as I landed at the beginning of a measure. It's going to sound awesome. And so one of the things I learned in my recording as well was to embrace the happy accidents. There's a few other happy accidents in that song where in the chorus, or if you call it a chorus, where it's built up with harmonies and everything, and then it drops down to the line, make it last. You hear this sort of swelling echo, this and that happened because I had this echo on a guitar that I was playing during that chorus, and then I had faded down, but I hadn't faded it down all the way, so it just started. It brought itself back because the echo was so long, and I was like, "Wow, that's cool." So there's all these like things that I stumble over, and then I end up embracing. I mean, you can call it naive, but I think that's part of the creative process, and something that we learned from improv is like everything can be a happy accident.
Yeah, mistakes
if you allow it to be. Yeah.
There's some pretty evocative imagery songs, but then there's also some songs where the lyrics are a little more opaque, and appropriately the slightly more opaque lyrics are on the more rocker type of songs, and the ones with more florid imagery are the I guess the more ballady. But let's talk about Forgotten Days for a minute.
Okay.
A tree was planted the day he died. I just want to read a lyric. I know it's a little cheesy to quote lyrics back to someone. I want to read a little lyric. The willow tree bows low, giving shade to the fallen who lie here below. I hear a mockingbird sing somewhere above my head, a song of life for the living, a benediction for the dead. I mean, that just blew me away. I mean, I heard that and I had to pause the song. I mean, that was
uh,
just, uh, I mean, I was there with you, you know?
um, yeah, thanks. I'm glad that it landed for you.
And
I'm
the,
glad that it landed for some people.
and
That
the harmonies are angelic on that.
yeah. Oh my God. Oh my God. The heart, like what Laura Brown did, is just incredible.
Yeah.
So first, the song. The song is literal. Like one of the things that happened during the pandemic is we lived close to Prospect Park, but it became full of people. So to even take a walk in Prospect Park was kind of nerve wracking. People still at that point were wearing masks outside. About 10 minutes the other direction is a park almost as big, but it's not a park. It's called Greenwood Cemetery, and it's huge. There's 500,000 people buried there. It's built on a ridge with all of these old growth trees. It's also a civil or a Revolutionary War battle site. Like it, it is beautiful, and it was one of the only places I could find solace during the pandemic outside because I could take my mask off. They don't mind if you walk on the grass between the graves. Like it is gorgeous. Trees, birds, like it literally was my savior in many ways. And so that song um, is an amalgamation of several grave sites and trees that I are some of my favorite spots there. I was telling this to our mutual friends Dan and Julie, Dan Barrett, Julie Malloy, when we were visiting in April, and Julie, you know how excited she gets. She was like, "Mark, you have to write a song about cemetery." um, which was is really sweet. You know, you kind of go, "Yeah, I do, yeah, whatever." But that was probably on a Friday, and a Monday morning, I was in the shower, and I was like, "You know what? Julie's right." I was in the shower, and I was like, "I need to write a song about the cemetery." And I came out of the shower, I got dressed, I picked up my guitar. There was a capo on the second fret. And I just started playing that. I mean, to, to me, it sounded sort of Van Morrison um, early Van Morrison kind of stuff. Uh, but the song was done in 10 minutes. Like that was one of the ones that the universe just like those lyrics that you just quoted were they just fell out of me.
Yeah.
Like because I let them like I feel like these songs are gifts to me, and they sort of don't belong to me, which is why I needed to put them out too. Um, but then I was like, there's so much space in this song, and I want some background vocals, and so I sent it to my old friend Laura Brown, who lives in Santiago, Chile. We went to high school together and we dated for many years and didn't date for many more years, but remained really close friends. And in fact, her son goes to school here at the new school in New York. Is an amazing musician uh, in his own right. But I sent these tracks to Laura, and I was like, I don't want you necessarily to sing along with me. There's just so much space in the song. I want you to be the spirits and the ghosts in the cemetery. I want you to capture the the, the ether. And she was like, okay. And whoa, she sent me back these layered vocals, and it was amazing. It was like I was blown away by her vocal arrangements and the harmonies she did, and like anybody I played it for, like Fabian, again, my friend Fabian, who was my producer consultant, was like, "Oh my god, she is incredible." That is like I credit her as arrangements as well. Like they're just beautiful, beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, I sent that one to Dave Berger as well to play drums on. Um, and I think he attempted three different ones, and I used the one that he sent me second.
On the song "A Brief History," it's another image full song, and
Mm-hmm.
it it reminded me of things like REM "End of the World as You Know It," kind of like that long list of things, and Billy Joel's "We Didn't Start the Fire," kind of a long list of, but with a more personal and kind of measured and emotional resonance to it than those are kind of bombastic songs,
Right.
but they are, but it did have like you name check having watched Dukes of Hazzard on Friday nights, and remembering being alive when JFK was murdered, and
Mm-hmm.
being almost essentially an adult when John Lennon was murdered, and the Greatest Generation. It really has a Townes Van Zandt, Merle Haggard, Mary Gauthier kind of singer songwriter feel to it, because it's a personal story, but it
Mm-hmm.
makes touchstones in history. I guess you'd probably put um, Neil Young in there as well. Um, it's got this. It could end as just like an autobiographical, well, this is what happened to me kind of song, but instead there's a message to it. Instead there's this, love carries on. You I don't, maybe it sounds too grandiose, but you will be saved by love, you'll be buoyed up by love. Love is what's real, etc. Kind of.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would throw that back at you, and I would say that through all of this is what I've learned.
Yeah.
I don't like I in this moment, in that moment in that song where it explodes into the 30 voice choir of myself.
Which is amazing.
um I it uh it's about my journey. Um and if others can relate to that, I didn't in that song I didn't mean to be preaching that message. It was like through all of this is what I've learned, and this is what's worked for me. um, you know, I've raised two kids. God knows I've made mistakes. I try to say I'm sorry when I'm wrong.
Yeah.
I've often lost faith, and hope's hard to hold, but love carries on. That's
Yeah.
like,
Um,
and again, those those are very biblical references there, because um, that comes from Corinthians 13. These three things remain: faith, hope, and love. But the greatest of these is love. People have that read at their wedding all the time.
yeah.
And so, um, again, those lyrics sort of fell out of me. That was the hardest song to write and record, just because, like, out of, it just, that one's raw for me.
Yeah.
there were times where I thought it was the cheesiest thing I've ever done, and I wanted to throw it away and just erase all the tracks. And then I, I would play it from Jimena, my wife, and she was like, "This is beautiful. This you have to put." This on there." Um, so I did it. I did it, and I wanted to send it to Steve to play guitar on in Shanghai, but they were locked down and trying to move. And so I did the choir, I did the guitar solos, whatever.
Sounds great. And you'll do live versions with Steve and with other musicians. That'll be amazing.
I
Um,
hope so.
I just love the contrast of long-haired Jesus. There's a portrait of long-haired Jesus in our house while the long-haired hippies were protesting the war, because that was such a that
Right.
that's just that nothing could be more nothing that's so evocative, because of the white Jesus portraits that Americans
Well,
love to have in their homes, while at the same time damning the long hairs outside who just want peace and love. Like,
yeah. I mean, that really is uh that first verse is a leer is I'm really proud of it in that I feel like I hit the contrast. You know, my father was in the Navy in World War II, the greatest generation. I was 1 year old the day that Kennedy died, the end of the American way. Like what he believed in has been broken. And what I remember is long haired Jesus looked down from our wall while boys died in the jungle on TV. And the long haired hippies that I see on TV are protesting for peace and love while the Beatles sing Let It Be. And, yeah, I had a crew cut until I was old enough in high school to grow my hair out, and then, because I came from that background.
yeah,
So, um, th- those, I mean, it's very purposeful. I try to hit those contrasts all the way along because everything at that point was playing out on TV for me until 9/11, where I hit the verse where I say, from a rooftop in Brooklyn, I saw the towers come down. Like I witnessed, everybody else saw that on TV, but this was part of history that we witnessed, you and I.
yeah.
Um, so that's part of the song too. And then my nephews went to fight in the wars. Like it's a hard song.
It's an historical document. I mean, like it's a personal, you know, it's the whole album is obviously a personal
Yeah,
memoir
yeah,
of sorts, but it's the history in the context of your life, or vice versa. Um, we're desperately shy on time, but there's a song, "It Will Come," which
mm-hmm.
also you have a smoking guitar solo on. Um, and you kind of, I gotta say, you kind of shyly maybe mixed your guitar solos in the background. Do you feel like you might have mixed them down a little bit? They feel a little quiet to me.
Maybe I've never considered myself, and still don't, much of a lead guitar player. Like I memorize a solo or do something that sounds what I think sounds good, but um, maybe
I haven't listened with
I,
headphones, so maybe if I listen with
yeah,
headphones, the solos will come
it'll pop out more.
but they are
Yeah.
great. And "It Will Come" has this funky bluesy kind of a thing happening, but the lyrics just grabbed me again. um Life's an uphill climb, so you got to wear good shoes. I'm, that sounds like a quote you heard from somebody, like on a bus or something,
I don't know. It just
or like a guidance
again, it was
counselor.
one of those. That was the last song that I was supposed to be done right. Like I had given myself a cutoff, and that song came out, and I was like, and again, I wrote it really. I think it was probably one of the last songs I wrote in May, this year, and it just popped out. And I didn't think much of it right away. Like I liked it, but then I sent it to Laura to do the background vocals. She was like, "Oh my god, the song's great. I
I
love it."
mean,
And
if I'm lucky, I'll be anywhere this time next year. Um, I used to be a prayer. Maybe I should start again. Uh, and the bass line, I don't know if you realize this, but there's a bass line that so sounds like Tom Waits. And some of your vocals on this record, by the way, sound a little Tom Waitsian, which is amazing. But he's on my mind because I just listened to an interview.
it's
Um,
funny. Lenny Block, who's a DJ at Radio Woodstock, just said that to me. So
it's take it as a compliment because it
no,
is.
no, I'll take it.
But the bass line on "It Will Come" sounds a little bit like Tom Waits' "Way Down in the Hole," which was, of course, the theme music for The Wire, the TV show.
Right.
Um, and it's so cool how I'm sure it was I assume it was unintentional. I'm sure it was unintentional. Did you play the concertina in Rainbow, or what sounds like a concertina, or a
Concertina, no, it's
harmonica,
only
harmonium, or something like that?
not in Rainbow. There's in Rainbow, I'm playing everything. It's only guitar and bass, drums. I programmed the drums and vocals, and that's my 2-year-old, who's 18-year-old now. But Mika, that's him at 2 years old,
Saying the
shouting the
colors.
primary colors. Yeah,
That's so great. He's not credited on the album. I'm gonna have to get in touch with him
he
about that.
is. He is. Go to
Oh,
Bandcamp. You see it. Yeah,
oh, okay.
yeah.
But okay, so again, full disclosure, I recently watched a new, not new. I recently newly watched a documentary about the making of the album. So Daniel Lanois is on my mind, Peter Gabriel's on my mind, but the triangle, or what sounds like the triangle at the beginning of
Mhm.
Rainbow, reminded me a little of the beginning of Mercy Street. Uh,
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
and then some of your vocals kind of get into Andy Partridge territory, which is just
Right.
so joyful for me to hear that. It just was like,
Right.
oh my God.
Yeah, I love XTC. I love Andy Partridge.
Yeah.
So yeah, and in fact, I didn't even pick up on that until Leo said to me, I was playing the song for him, and he was like, "Dad, you sound like the guy from XTC," and I was like, "Really?"
You
And I played it
do.
back, and I was like, "Yeah, I got that. I get it
So
on that song."
your
Sure.
vocal range on this album is, I mean, I know your vocal range because of all the bands and things like that. But I mean,
Yeah.
on this album, it really, you've got these growly kind of things. You've got this like sort of, like I said earlier, Townes Van Zandt, sort of Steve Earlish storyteller kind of voice. You've got this, um, obviously you're doing harmonies in falsetto and in high tones, and then these very melodic, very soft, almost gentle voice for the more ballady songs.
Right.
um did you do you when you're recording, do you have to intentionally, like I was listening to uh, uh, Peter Gabriel and Daniel Lanois talking about having to record the lower vocals in the morning when his voice wouldn't naturally have been warmed up yet. Did you have to plan out like, okay, well, I'm going to record this ballad today, so I can't do the kind of rougher songs before that?
Usually I would record vocals in the afternoon, but when my voice is a little bit warmed up, I would do instruments in the morning. But um, I don't know if you've watched the Hulu McCartney 1, 2, 3
Yeah, yeah.
with
Rick Rubin.
Rick Rubin. But one thing McCartney, like I just love it. He's like a little kid. Paul McCartney is like where he's hearing things for the first time since he recorded them, and he's like in their triggering memories. And Rubin asked him about singing. Even forget what song specifically. And he was like, "Oh yeah, I would use this kind of voice, and then I would use this kind of voice, and then like on this song, I would use different voices to tell different stories." And I was like, "I have a lot of different voices." It might not be Paul McCartney, but like I know how to use my voice as an actor and the improviser. I've learned how to use my voice. I have a strong falsetto. I can wail really loudly. I have a low kind of growly speaking voice. So sometimes I would double, like something on Your Sweet Lies, where I'm singing right here in my range where I'm talking, but I'm also singing up here while I'm an octave above it, and I'm mixing that in there to give it some depth. Um, so it was fun. It was fun. Yeah, like I just really had fun with the vocals. Sometimes I would sing a song and I was like, I didn't sing that right. I didn't use the right register of my voice, or I didn't like the where I'm singing it. So I would do it again with a different. I would try it again in a different way. Again, I, allowing myself the room to experiment and not judge myself. It's really hard to hear your own voice when you first are recording it, but uh, I, I found that the more I did it, and the more that I actually had fun with it, especially on something like Your Sweet Lies, where I'm doing all these, I was like, I'm going to do Prince. Like, I'm going to pull some Prince strings here. I was like, I don't know if I'll keep it, but I'm going to do it. And I was like, okay, like, this is awesome. I have no idea where that song came from. I mean, it's a song about meeting my wife, but again, pulled out of the ether, like, boom.
Fantastic.
So fun.
Well, congratulations. It's
Thanks, man.
super great. It's available everywhere, right? It's on.
Yeah, it's on Spotify and YouTube and Apple Music and Amazon Music. It's at Bandcamp, although Fragile is not listed on Bandcamp because they have an issue with managing cover song licenses. I hope to early in the year release some vinyl. I'm gonna have like maybe 200 pressed, and to start, and I'll probably end up putting 150 in my basement storage locker. But whatever. I'm old school, and I want to have I want to have a printed copy.
Yeah, man. And people love vinyl once again.
Yeah.
And then tour. We got to get you to do some gigs.
Well, Biff is going to be here in November. Um, Performing the songs is way different than recording them. You only have to play it once right when you record it. Right? And once you got it, you're like, oh, okay, I'm done. So Biff is coming in November. Biff and Mary are coming out. He's bringing his violin, and we're just going to do a little house concert. He's going to play violin with me, and I'm going to play acoustic guitar, and we're going to do like a 10-song set of some of the album, some of the songs off the album. Some of them won't work without a full on band, and some of them are just hard to play. Like Your Sweet Lies, I'm having to teach myself how to play that while I sing it because it's so syncopated. It's really hard. Um, uh, but that'll be my first cutting my teeth on that, and then we'll see.
Yeah.
See what happens, what I have time for, and what the universe brings. And then in the meantime, I'm gonna mix some of those cover songs that I recorded and re-record some of that. And the band that I play in that doesn't have a name right now also is going to put out an album, hopefully before the end of the year. We have a few more songs, a few more tracks to record, background vocals mostly, and that'll be out.
Fantastic.
Lots of projects.
That's what it's about. We just got to wear good shoes. Well, thank you, Mark, for taking the time to do the chat show.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. I'm glad it worked.
It's a pleasure. And I just really love the album. I'm really excited for you. So I'll put like subtitles under us that tell people where to go to get it and stuff. And then we'll get back in touch. Well, hopefully we'll be in touch off the air, but we'll get back in touch on the air when your other songs come out, and get those out into the world.
Cool.
Thanks
Right on,
again.
man. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time. This has been Mark Hervey. Look into the grab the album when you can. It's called About Time, and we'll see you next time on this show. Thank you.